Well, for the second occasion in a week, it's that time again. Gather round, put the logs on the fire, and let's have a little ramble about an FM26 feature. And this time, we're talking about the one that I personally have been waiting for, which is the transfer recruitment revamp. We're going to have a little talk about some of the pros and cons. And again, a bit like the last one we did on tactics, it's going to be personal to my gameplay and it's just going to be thoughts in my head. Things that I think are going to go well from it, things that leave me a little bit concerned. Certainly not going to be criticisms. I'm a massive fan of FM. I play 1,000 hours pretty much every release. So I'm certainly not going to be getting critical. And again, a quick caveat before we start, as I did in the last one. I've deliberately left it a couple of days. This isn't a clickbait channel. We're not going to be going for the big headline news. If that's what you want, there are plenty of other channels out there. We're just going to be having a little chat and a little ramble about some of the features and what I think they could do to benefit or potentially be a concern in a new game. So hopefully you're looking forward to that. But a very quick message before we start as well. As always, you can pre-order FM26 now via my Fanatical link for 22% off Steam's price, advanced access, and to obviously help support the channel as well. Link in the eye above and description below. An extra 5% off thanks to my code LOADFM26. And as always, if you haven't seen any of the other FM26 stuff so far, we've got a whole playlist of save ideas and we've had another ramble with the tactics upgrade on Tuesday. So you can come and have a look at that evolution video and our 26 save ideas if you're looking for a little bit of inspiration. With that out the way though, let's start as we did last time with some of the big positives from this transfer recruitment revamp, because there is so much to like about it and there is so much that needed to be done, which we'll talk a little bit more about later, and my opinions from later on in FM24 and what we've got to potentially look forward to in this year's game. Because in Football Manager 26, it all links back to the new user interface, which, as I mentioned on Tuesday and in pretty much every live stream Discord chat for the last few months, is the thing that excites me most about this new game. The way it looks, the way it's been designed, it just feels like it's going to be so much more intuitive. It's going to be so much easier to interact with, and there's going to be fewer clicks to do pretty much everything. The new recruitment screen, the overview screen, looks fantastic, and it is something that I've been calling for a long time, because an integrated recruitment hub is something you've not really had in FM, because everything traditionally has been a little bit clunky or has been in different places. So while early in FM24, the squad planner actually integrated pretty well with what, say, the director of football and the AI did and how recruitment worked. Yes, it got worse a bit later on with some of the updates, but despite the fact it was pretty well integrated in the background, it was all over the place in terms of menus. The squad planner was in a completely different place to the recruitment screen and the transfer center and the player search and the contracts. We were basically going to completely different areas of the game to do 4 or 5 different tasks that all fell under the sort of recruitment and the player management style. So it's really useful that in this year's game, it all seems to be on one screen. And I'm glancing over here because that's where I've got the article that's got all of the screenshots and that on. And it just looks so much more user-friendly. The squad planner being in the middle, next to the contracts, the transfer activity, the player database, the scouting, all on one screen, all clickable with one button from tiles and tabs. Just looks fantastic. And I really think that that's going to be a huge upgrade to the game and actually maybe make things a little bit quicker. Aside from the fact I'm going to want to spend hours more on that screen, it's actually going to make it a lot quicker to complete the same task. So the first thing for me is a massive praise, because regardless of how it functions in the background, which obviously we hope will be excellent too, it does look fantastic. It's a lot less scattered. It should be a lot less clicks. And it's great to have all of those elements on one screen rather than managing that general recruitment side of the game on 4 or 5 completely different screens. So as with many things in a user interface update, I'm a massive fan and I'm really, really pleased with this. More than anything, I'm excited by how it looks. But what that also means is that now tactics, scouting and focuses have been streamlined too, because there was a lot of talk about how the recruitment focuses are going to work, and the fact that this year, not only are they integrated with your squad planner and the scouting and all of that sort of thing, but they're also integrated with your tactics well. Now, this is something that was to an extent in FM24. Of course, we didn't have in and out of possession tactics there. We didn't have quite so much detail. But this is something that was available, whether it be in a squad planner, whether it be in recruitment focuses. But it's something that I feel in the last game was massively underused. And actually, we had a couple of specials on how to use little elements of it, how to use certain parts of recruitment focuses and search for certain clauses, because so many people didn't know and so many people didn't use that side of the screen and just sort of delegated it to scouting, which is a shame because it was actually probably the most powerful, realistic recruitment tool that we've seen in the game for a long time. And again, I know with some updates along the road, it lost its way a little. But in the beta, certainly for FM24 and in the early months of it, it was one of the best functioning features, as we saw a lot in the head coach. So the fact that this is now easier to use, it's there staring you in the face, and it's going to be visible and probably the primary transfer search function for a lot of people moving forward is great. And it is more realistic because there's always been that age-old debate of, well, is it realistic to just have a player search screen with a huge database? And obviously in more modern years, you can argue, yes, it is, because lots of people use FM and use their player search screen as part of their scouting and recruitment team. So there's no doubt that it's become more realistic, but certainly to clubs lower down the pyramid, it perhaps wouldn't be that way. And to have something where you can look for dedicated focuses as your primary function rather than having to look for it or it being hidden out the way is something that I think is really important. So the fact that that's been integrated and streamlined properly, I really like, because it's a good feature and it should get used more now, particularly with people being excited about the two types of tactics and that extra detail. The other positive I want to focus on is the new powered by transfer room features. And we're going to talk about the two in a minute, but the fact that they're now working with more real life tools, and it is a testament for all of the people who criticize FM and for all of the little nags and complaints we all have about the game. The fact that more real life tools are wanting to work with FM, and the fact that more real world football is using more of FM or utilizing more of its database is a massive compliment to the game. And the fact that these real life tools such as Transfer Room are now working closely in FM and have got dedicated features in there is only going to make it more realistic for us, particularly at those higher levels of the game where a lot of the focus obviously will be. And as we mentioned on Tuesday in the tactics one, a lot of FM's push this year with the console edition, with the tile screen, is to try and get new people into the game, to try and take some of the FIFA Manager career mode audience over here. And that's going to make a massive difference this year. Having a game that's easier to use with more realistic real life tools is going to make an absolutely massive difference. And the fact that we've got Transfer Room in with two big features, which we'll speak about in a minute, can only be a positive in the game moving forward. And if you can make it better for the top level of the game, of course, that is going to bring more people in, going to get more players on the game, and again, allow an expanded budget and more future features for SI in the future. So that can only be a good thing for FM players, albeit I'll talk a little bit later about, again, my concerns for the way I play the game, which I appreciate is becoming a minority now. But I do think overall it's a really good thing for the game. And it should mean that we get a better and more realistic approach for top teams, because I know PSR got mentioned in the article and the way that transfers are going to be conducted between top clubs to try and deal with the financial fair play restrictions. And it's probably the thing in modern football at the top level, certainly in the Premier League, that has changed the most over the last even 5 years. It used to be even a decade ago that you would very rarely see transfers between top sides, and it would be a bit of a tug of war for 2-3 months to get it done. Whereas now, because of PSR, because of players wanting to be moved on and trying to get the balance sheet level, we're seeing more sales of players that have been developed through an academy, more sale of squad players and turnover of people within a 25-man squad. Not to mention the fact that we've got bigger squads in general at the top level of the game. And that's something that FM has to adapt to. It's something that probably didn't happen enough comparatively in FM24, but very quickly the game seems to have put in measures to adapt to it. And now we should see more transfers between the top clubs with the integrated approach and with the fact that we've now got these two new features. I want to focus on one of them in the positives area, because one of the biggest complaints that people have made about FM for years is how hard it is to sell your deadwood from the squad, how hard it is to get people off the books, whether it be on loan, whether it be permanently, whether it be for free, just not being able to shift them at all. Now, it shouldn't be possible 100% of the time, because you look at examples now with United and Chelsea where they've got their bomb squads of people they couldn't get out of the club. But it should be a little bit easier than it is at certain times in FM. And there are various reasons that's not been the case. But pitch opportunities should help with that, because it gives you the opportunity to quite literally pitch your players to the other clubs adds a little bit more autonomy to it, which is something they've crucially mentioned. No more of those clicking sliders over and over again, trying to negotiate little deals, trying to offer players for slightly less each time. But in this, you can search for where clubs have weaknesses and try and push your players to them. Get in first before they go and find another target, and maybe offer them a slightly better deal to get one done quickly. Or if you're getting towards the end of a transfer market or a transfer window and you're seeing a club are desperate, you can maybe get a little bit above value to try and get players out of the club and deal with one of their problem areas. Now, that's going to come to a negative as well that I'm going to mention a bit later on, something I'm a bit concerned about. But certainly for the top levels of the game where you've got players that you're trying to get off the wage bill, and that's so important, it can be a massive help. I do have my questions about how it's going to work further down the pyramid, because obviously we see a lot of free transfers, a lot of fees that are very minimal, and a lot of loan deals. But that's something that's also been mentioned for FM26, which, to read out the specifics, more loans with future fees and buyback clauses, better logic surrounding preferred position in loan negotiations, something that used to drive many of us nuts last year, and improvements to when and why the AI recall players from loans early, because again, that links to the conversations and the preferred positions. So if that all works well, it could be a good feature in the lower areas of the game as well, where I'd expect more of those deals to be loan ones rather than permanents. But of course, we'll have to wait and see how that integrates in the game. But overall, looks like it could be a very good feature for FM26. I guess overall, though, rather than focusing on a specific part, the biggest positive I take for FM26 is that so many more elements of the recruitment screen are going to be used more. That's partly because things seem to be a lot more closely integrated this year, something we've been calling out for tactics, for transfers, for scouting, for the match day, all of those things to sort of intertwine. They don't feel like separate elements now, which they aren't in a club really. And at the top level, to have those things streamlined, to have them overlap in such an extent, I always mentioned in the FM24 beta, the most powerful thing and the best thing was how well the squad planner and the recruitment intertwined and overlap, because it's something obviously in our main Save the Head coach we rely on. We're under a director of football. We're just a coach. We're managing the players. We're looking after them. We're making sure the tactics right. We're getting them on the pitch in a good condition. But then when you've set your squad planner, you rely on your director of football to go and do the recruitment, the transfers, the contracts, the staffing. And if they're not following your tactics, they're not following the squad planner, it can be a nightmare for you, because as we've seen at times last year, you end up with either 5 left backs and no centre midfielders, or you end up, as we did at Bayern Munich ridiculously, in the FM24 head coach with a 12 or 13 man senior squad, because there just isn't any overlapping or understanding that this squad can't compete. There isn't enough players here in the squad planner. It was just ignoring it in the end. And that's something that from the beta to the later edition of FM24 went completely off the rails somewhere. And I'm really hoping in FM26 we'll see a return to form for that. So mainly from a selfish point of view, we can do a proper head coach. But if the AI squad building is tweaked and is better, which again we'll mention a bit later on, that is something that could be so powerful. And for me, probably the most important upgrade across the board for Football Manager 26. So we've talked about a lot of positives, and I am genuinely really excited for how a lot of this looks. But we do have to go and have a look at some of the things I'm potentially a little bit more worried about as well, or things that I wonder, will they be there, or are they going to be missing as part of this? Something we ask a lot with the tactics side of it. And of course, since then, we've had a couple of answers. Hopefully from this one, we'll get them as well. But my first question really, for the two features, the pitch opportunities and for the requirements screen, which is the equivalent, but in terms of buy-in, where you're looking for a certain position, you're looking for a certain role, is yes, it's great that you've now got the ability to say, this is exactly what I need. This is what our club is desperate for. Have you got anyone that fits it? But what we generally see in the transfer market, particularly at the higher levels of the game, where it's so commercial and so much of a business, is it makes the market more dynamic. And we see people playing overinflated transfer fees at certain times, particularly at the end of a January transfer window when they're desperate. We see other ones where late in a window, deals will just get done very quickly for maybe a lower price than you'd expect, or surprisingly quickly, because both clubs need the deal done and it suits them both. So I guess my question out of that is, will it make the transfer market more dynamic at the same time? I.e., a price increase, if you put an advert in a day before the end of the window and go, oh my God, I desperately need a left back, both of mine have got injured, and you've got the perfect flying wing back that's been suggested by another club, are they going to try and charge you more for the fact that you're desperately needing that player? And you're saying, this is specifically what we need. They're saying, we've got this exact perfect player for you. You're happy with them. Are they going to say, well, hang on a minute. If you need them now with a day of the transfer window to go and you're desperate, you're going to pay a few extra million or you're going to pay a few extra thousand, depending on what level you're at. Is that element going to be in the game as well? Because I feel it's so important to make those features work. And I know it's a new feature and it's something that will probably develop over time. But I just feel that it can't be as easy as you going in and saying, this is exactly what I need, and you not being penalised financially for it. Because in the real world, we see that transfer fees are so dynamic towards the end of windows when they're the case. And that's why a lot of clubs don't do their deals in January now. So be very intriguing to see how that interacts and whether it's involved at all. It's something that maybe not so much a pro or a con, something I'm intrigued to see if it's in there. And I wonder if it's something that's been thought about or considered when this approach has been taken. My next potential concern is, again, not really a negative for the game, but it is something that I've copied over from the Tactics Ramble, which is this detail that many clubs won't employ? And again, as someone who predominantly manages in the lower leagues, whether it be non-league football, semi-professional clubs, the Welsh second tier as my example I used then, are all of those clubs going to have big recruitment teams that are able to go and do these things? Because what you actually see at a lot of non-league clubs now are players that are living or returning to their local area who are experienced coming in, people who the manager knows bringing with them from another club, players getting re-signed quite a lot when they return to the area and going for a second or third stint, and players coming on loan on short-term deals. So actually, in terms of these tools, again, very good for the top of the game, makes it more realistic. We've talked about it before, but will it have that much of an impact further down the divisions? And I guess the same question as the tactics, will the level of detail be toned down? Will the utilization by the AI managers, coaches, recruitment teams be toned down? Because this isn't going to be a feature that is going to be hugely used at National League South or second tier Welsh clubs, because while there is that element, of course, there's an ever-expanding team at every club now, there isn't going to be that big recruitment team, that big data analysis team. There aren't going to be loads of scouts. It's going to be a lot more reliant on what the club already knows. And I wonder if that's maybe going to make this feature less useful at the lower levels and maybe something that's not going to be quite as simple to use. Or is it then going to end up being as it is at the top clubs in FM and then becomes a little bit unrealistic when you're managing at the level I am? And I appreciate that we're in the minority that do those long-term saves that are largely focused in the lower leagues. And a lot of this is to try and attract people to the top end of the game with those more realistic features used. But from a selfish point of view, it's something I do have to worry and be concerned about. And again, it leads on to another one which we talked about in tactics, which is, are the staff going to be integrated as well? If you're delegating this stuff, are larger recruitment teams at the top level, are they going to be more useful? Are they going to be taking more of a role? How's the director of football going to operate? Because ultimately, that's something I rely on again in the head coach. And will we see a difference between the bottom level and the top level when we're managing at different clubs throughout the career? Something I'm intrigued to see the answer to. If we move on to something slightly smaller though, and a couple of the little things that got mentioned at the end, I think there are two of the mini bullet points that I'm a little bit concerned about. The first one, again, probably relates to lower clubs more than the elite ones, but new transfer clauses for individual player awards, which obviously you would expect to be things like top goal scorer, Ballon d'Or winner at the very top level, those sorts of things. But individual player awards are going to make a massive difference. Getting player of the season in the league, things like that. I guess we used to have it to an extent of being in team of the season, but my worry going back to FM24 is there were so many workarounds and unrealistic deals you could pull off if you wanted to use them. And obviously we tried to avoid it generally on the channel, but it is something that made things unrealistic because, for example, you were in the National League South and you were signing a part-time Englishman. You could normally knock £100 off the wages a week if you threaten to give them an international cap bonus when you know they're never ever going to play for England. And even if you go back in previous times, you're talking about one Jamie Vardy in 15 years that's had a substantial amount of their career in non-league and then pushed up the leagues later in their 20s. It's not something that you're going to see regularly. However, in FM, it was a way around in FM24, and it allowed people to achieve more quickly. It made the English leagues a bit easier. Of course, you can choose just to avoid it as a player, but it is something that's unrealistic. You're not going to have any player that's English in the National League North or South who says, yeah, I'll take less wages if I get an international cap, because you know it's not going to happen. So there is an area there where I just hope that those deals have been integrated to only be for players of an appropriate reputation. And maybe for someone like me who complains that reputation is far too important in FM over certain other elements, over form, for example, with players, maybe this is an area where reputation could be used to more effect to ensure that people who had a half-star reputation wouldn't then allow you to put an international cap bonus in if their nation is actually a 4 or 5-star nation. Something that it feels could be easily done. So hopefully that's something that can be integrated too. But for now, it is a little bit of a concern. The other one on that list, I guess, again, because of the experience of how it worked in FM24, is the changes to how clubs sign younger players to satisfy club visions. Because we've all had, I think, our fair problems with club vision last year in terms of club culture and which players get signed and whatever else. Whether it's from the tactical side or from the transfer side, they've both been problematic in stages. But it needs to be better, because I know a lot more clubs do this now. There are young players moving between clubs because they want to try and make a profit. If they register them and sign them for 3 years up to the age of 21, they can, of course, make that ultimate profit on their balance sheets for PSR and FFP. But what we actually ended up seeing in FM24 a lot of the time was just people being signed that were absolute dross, or to make up the numbers in the under-21 team because of poor recruitment and squad building. And there were players that the club were never going to make a profit on, and most of the time just released for free a couple of years later. So that's something I would like to see improve. People that are going to have more potential being signed in those areas, rather than it just being for the sake of it, filling the squad to satisfy the visions. So the changes, I hope, are that they focus on players that have actually got some talent, rather than just doing it for the sake of it. That's my fingers crossed for FM26 there. The biggest con I have to mention, though, and the biggest things I'm worrying about, are the AI squad building. Now, there's been a lot of talk about this, and they've talked about tweaks in their message in there, and obviously other things will impact it too. But based on what we saw at the end of FM24, and certainly for me at the end of the head coach, is AI squad building tweaks enough this year? Are they going to be enough? Because we saw 13, 14-man elite senior squads. We saw elite sides that had full squads of players aged 31 to 37. And look, we've had a lot of discussions on Discord and in live streams about this, and there's a few that have got pretty strong opinions on it. So I know one of our regulars, Macca, always talks about, because the real players don't have the most negative personalities for obvious reasons, it means that they get clung on to a bit longer than, say, a regen would or a new gen if they've got a casual or a low determination, for example, some of the poorer personalities. But because you don't see those in the real pros, their personalities are a bit better. Does it mean that they're getting signed for longer or kept on for longer than other players would? And that stops that sort of first generation of youngsters coming along. And that means we've got older squads at the top level. Is it as simple as some of the new gens aren't good enough, or the personalities aren't quite right, which means they aren't then able to break through? Is it that the AI just aren't signing the right players? Is it the lack of transfers between clubs, which some of the things we mentioned earlier might resolve? I'm hoping that the issues are going to be fixed, because at the start of FM24, it was actually in a really good place, I thought, generally. We started our head coach saved. The director of football was following a squad planner, signing a mix of players that fit the club vision and leaving us with a pretty balanced squad overall. But then 9 months later, I was at an elite club with a 12-man squad. I'd seen completely unbalanced squads at top sides prior to that. And I was actually left a bit worried and a bit frustrated by the way the director of football operated, because I actually felt it went backwards as the game went on. So I'm really hoping that that's something that is going to improve in FM26. For me, the way I play the game, again, selfishly, I do 15, 20, 25-year saves. I need that to work. And I appreciate I'm in the minority now, because we've talked about it before. Rebuilds are the popular thing at the moment. Those sort of 3 to 5 year turnarounds then start again, where you're never really getting to that stage where it becomes a problem 8 to 10 to 12 years into a career. But it is something for the long-term player. And I guess for the community that largely watches my channel, we are the long-term savers. We are the old school folk. We are the ones who do those saves over 20 years, building a nation, building a club, going from bottom to top. And to do that and to do it realistically, squad building needs to be right, both for AI clubs and if you're doing a save like mine with a director of football in charge of transfer staff and contracts, you need them to be getting that right for you as well. So you've got some form of a balanced squad, or at least enough people in the squad for the most part. And that's something where it did fall down towards the end of FM24. So fingers crossed that will be resolved for this year. But overall, and again, I know I've mentioned a few things that I'm concerned about and could potentially be negatives, but I have to reiterate, I do love FM. I play it for 1,000 hours every year. It's a brilliant game with great value for money. And overall, it does a fantastic job. But I've got to talk about the things that are in my head that I'm a little bit concerned about for the new game and with the features that are coming along, especially with this one, where it was the one I've been waiting for. It's the one that's most important to me and probably the one that had the most negative impact on my later FM24 experience. So fingers crossed it's going to be an improvement. Either way, it looks fantastic. I love the new user interface. I love the way that the recruitment screen looks, and I love the way every screen's looked so far. I just hope that those streamlined processes, the new realistic features from Transfer Room and that, I just hope that A, they adapt to different levels of the game, and B, that they make things work better as well as look better. That's all I'm hoping for. But overall, really promising signs, and it looks like it's going to be 2 years worth of wait. And hopefully, we're only going to be waiting, 1 to 2 more weeks now before the beta. I hope you're looking forward to it as much as me. If you are, let me know what you're most looking forward to in a new game. Which of these transfer features most caught your eye? Are you most excited about from the recruitment revamp? Do check out the tactics one if you haven't already, and the save idea videos if you're yet to decide who you're going to manage in Football Manager 26. If you have, let me know down in the comments below who it's going to be. I can't wait to see how you're all getting on in your saves, and keep us updated in the Discord FM chat, of course. For now, though, if you did enjoy this one, please do chuck a thumbs up on it. Thank you for joining me down by the fireside for another ramble. Please do subscribe and turn that notification bell on for plenty of FM26 content every day as soon as the beta's out. And of course, that Save Ideas playlist up in the eye above, as is the link to pre-order FM26 via Fanatical for 22% off Steam's price and to help support me as well. Thank you for watching and being here for another week. I do appreciate it massively. We're nearly there. We've nearly got FM26 to sink our teeth into. I can't wait for it. My last Save Ideas video and my channel update with my plans for the new game will be out early next week. So stick around for them. Come and join us on Twitch for regular live streams. I'll see you again soon as we've got more from FM26.